Saturday, the 11th of May, 1940. 218 Squadron had a very bad day. 4 very battle aircraft set off to attack a low-level enemy column on the Dahlem Olzheim road inside the German border with the Netherlands. They took off from Auberive-sur-Suippes. One half section led by P2249 HA-R Sergeant Dockrill with P2249 HA-U P.O. Murray took off at 9:30, while the second half section led by P2326 HA-X Acting Flight Lieutenant Cruz in command of the mission with K9325 HA-D with Flying Officer Hudson as his number 2 left the base at 9:40 a.m. The half section led by Sergeant Dockrill made heavy fire on the way to attack the primary target and attempted unsuccessfully to bomb the bridges north of St.Vith. Battle 2203 HA-R and Battle 2249 HA-U, both of 218 Squadron, crashed near Basbellain when brought down by enemy fighters and heavy AA ground fire. P2203 aircraft exploded in the air, crashed in flames near Basbellain in Luxembourg. The crew were Sergeant Charles James Ernest Dockrill, the pilot, aged 26, Sergeant Percival Frank Dormer, observer, aged 27, and aircraftsman First Class Kenneth George Gregory, aged 27. This crash was witnessed by Peter Stubbs, the observer in Murray's crew, in a book, Silk and Barbed Wire, flying in P2249, as described it as the last he saw of it was the face of AC Kenneth Gregory, a gunner in Sergeant Dockrill's flaming P2203, which exploded at 30 feet and hit trees below. As you can see from the images, the wreckage supports his claim. Initially buried in a field grave, these airmen were reburied in 1942 in the municipal cemetery of Basbellain, Luxembourg. P2249 HA-U, all crew were taken POWs. Pilot Officer Henry McHale Murray was badly burnt and had flak in his shoulder. He was born in 1920 in New Zealand, and he had a Bachelor of Commerce degree. He died in 1983 in New Zealand. Sergeant Peter Stubbs, the observer, captured, wounded in his right arm and admitted to hospital in Neuse. He was born in 1920 in Liverpool and died in Perth in Australia in 2006. AC2 Ivan George Adams was born in 1920. He was a clerk and died in 1986. Stubbs' report reads as follows. It was obvious that we could not last much longer. The rattle of bullets hitting the aircraft was continuous now. The cannon shells were tearing holes in the wings. As I lay on the floor firing at the enemy below, I felt a couple of shells bend the armour plating just beneath me. Soon flames leaped out from the engine, and smoke and flames surrounded P.O. Murray, my pilot. All I could see through the hatch was a forest of trees very close. Then there was a grinding crunch as we hit the ground. We had just missed the trees and crashed into a field beside the farmhouse at full speed. My monkey chain, that's a safety chain used to prevent an air gunner from falling out of an open cockpit aircraft, snapped with the impact, and I shot forward, hitting the instrument panel with my face as earth and stones roared through the hatch. I crawled to the rear of the aircraft to climb out and found my right hand would not work. It had been hit by a cannon shell, but in the case I had not noticed it. I was wondering how to climb out when the tanks collapsed, pouring blazing petrol into the cabin. The heat was unbelievable, and a few seconds later I was outside the aircraft standing on the ground. My chest parachute had come undone, and the white silk was covered in blood. The Germans continued to fire at us as we crouched beside the burning battle. About 100 yards away was a potato field with deep furrows, and knowing it would not be long before the bombs exploded in the heat of the fire, we decided our best chance was to make a dash for it. Murray was badly burnt, but Adams was uninjured. I was rather slower than the others, and a bullet hit me in the elbow as we ducked in the furrows. The enemy continued to fire at us as we lay on the ground. Then around 16 Germans walked towards the blazing battle, cheering at their success and shooting us down. Suddenly the bombs exploded, and lumps of debris screamed down on the surrounding area. We looked up again. There was no battle and no Germans, just an enormous hole in the ground. From the images you can see this impact. So the other two aircraft, P2326, the crew were Flying Officer Cruz and Evans became POWs, but Jennings was killed in action. Acting Flight Lieutenant Charles Arthur Reginald Cruz was born in 1912, died in 1960. I have an image of him here from 1927. Like Thomas Stevens Evans was born in 1919, and we don't know when he died. Sergeant Cedric Morris Jennings, the observer, was born in 1920 and was killed in action aged 20. The aircraft was abandoned over Amersfoort, east of St.Vith in Belgium. The aircraft crashed about 1 kilometre south-southeast of Amersfoort, probably into a wood. Charles Arthur Reginald Cruz, the pilot, and like Thomas Stephen Evans, bailed out under 150 feet, landed in trees, and both were captured unhurt. Unfortunately, Sergeant Frederick Morris Jennings was killed in action, also bailed out, but he was buried beside the wreck of his aircraft. Soon after the end of the war, his remains were reinterred in the British War Cemetery of Heverlee, south of Louvain in Belgium. Charles Cruz was repatriated via Sweden, arriving in the UK on the 16th of September 1944. K9325 HA-D, Hudson and crew were all POWs. Flying Officer Anthony John Hudson was born in 1914 and died in 1984 in Wales. Sergeant Niall Henry Thompson, the observer, was born in 1921. He was an architect's student and died in Australia in 1996. Aircraftsman First Class Arthur Ellis was born in 1919. He was an electrician and he died in 1998. This plane belly landed, believed to have been near St.Vith, at approximately 10 a.m. The plane, from the images available, is very much intact and was recovered by the Germans.